Lines of riot police blocking Austria's border with Italy, clashing with demonstrators who wanted to pass through.
Millions waiting in Africa. What shall we do with them? Come all over to Europe, to Britain, to Austria? Impossible.
In early 2025, Austria, once a key destination for those seeking refuge, has declared what many are calling a war on immigration. This isn't just a subtle policy shift, it's a dramatic and sudden hardening of its borders and a fundamental change in its approach to migrants and refugees. But why now? What has pushed this prosperous European nation to take such a drastic turn? The story is a complex tapestry of political maneuvering, economic anxieties, and a deep-seated shift in public opinion. To understand why Austria is building what some are calling Fortress Austria, we need to look at the events that have led to this pivotal moment in 2025. To get to the heart of Austria's sudden crackdown on immigration, we have to rewind to the national elections in late 2024. The results were a political earthquake. For the first time in its post-war history, the far-right Freedom Party, or FPER, emerged as the strongest political force, winning the most votes. Their campaign was built on a single, powerful message, Fortress Austria. Led by the controversial Herbert Kickl, the FPO umlaut promised to drastically cut immigration, end what they termed forced multiculturalism, and even promote remigration, a policy that implies the mass deportation of migrants. The FPO umlaut's victory was fueled by a wave of voter anger over inflation, the war in Ukraine, and most significantly, immigration. For years, a significant portion of the Austrian population has expressed growing concern about the number of asylum seekers and the challenges of integration. In fact, a 2023 survey shockingly labelled Austria as the most anti-immigration country in the world. The FPO umlaut tapped into this sentiment with masterful precision, promising a return to a more homogeneous, culturally conservative Austria. However, despite winning the election, the FPO umlaut did not take power. In a move to block a far-right chancellorship, the more mainstream party is the Conservative Austrian People's Party, EREPP, the centre-left Social Democrats Spur, and the Liberal Neos formed a coalition government in February 2025. But here's the crucial twist. In their bid to appease the large number of voters who supported the FPO umlaut and to address the widespread anti-immigration sentiment, this new mainstream coalition adopted a surprisingly hardline stance on immigration itself. While they presented it as a slightly softer approach than the FPO umlauts, the policies they unveiled were anything but. So what does this new war on immigration actually look like? The new government wasted no time in rolling out a series of stringent measures. First, and perhaps most controversially, they announced an immediate and temporary halt to family reunification for asylum seekers. This means that refugees who have been granted protection in Austria are no longer allowed to bring their family members, including children, from their home countries. The government's justification? To prevent the overloading of Austria's social services and education system. Chancellor Christian Stocker of the AO umlaut VP was unequivocal, stating, "Immediate means now." Rights organisations were quick to condemn the move. Amnesty International called it an inhumane and illegal measure, while the UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, described the plan as disturbing. Critics argue that this policy not only violates international law, but also puts vulnerable women and children at greater risk by forcing them to take dangerous, irregular routes to join their families. Next, the coalition announced plans for new deportation centres where rejected asylum seekers will be held before being removed from the country. This is coupled with a significant increase in deportations, which already hit a record high in 2024. Interior Minister Gerhard Karmer has been vocal about the success of these stricter policies, pointing to the dramatic drop in asylum applications as proof that they are working. Indeed, the numbers are stark. After receiving over 110 asylum applications in 2022, the number plummeted to just under 25. In 2024, an 80% decrease. While the government credits its tough stance, critics suggest that many asylum seekers may simply be avoiding Austria due to its increasingly hostile environment. Furthermore, the new government is making it harder to become Austrian. A mandatory integration program is being introduced for all asylum seekers from day one, including language classes and education on Austrian values. Failure to comply can lead to financial penalties, such as reduced social benefits. The path to citizenship is also becoming more difficult, with stricter language tests and a new citizenship course. The government's narrative is clear. They are taking decisive action to protect Austria's resources and cultural identity. But beyond the political rhetoric, what are the economic and social factors driving this crackdown? Economically, Austria is facing headwinds. The European Commission has projected a third consecutive year of economic recession for the country in 2025, citing low investment and declining exports. In times of economic uncertainty, immigrants often become an easy scapegoat. The debate around the economic impact of immigration is a heated one. On one hand, studies have highlighted the crucial role migrants play in the Austrian labour market, particularly in sectors like tourism and construction in Vienna. With a negative birth rate, Austria's population growth is solely dependent on immigration. Without it, the population would shrink to levels not seen since the 1950s days. On the other hand, there are concerns about the strain on the welfare state. A report from the Ministry of Integration in April 2025 suggested that an asylum-seeking family in Vienna could receive more in welfare payments than the take-home pay of an average working Austrian family. This has fueled a perception that the system is overly generous and has made Vienna a magnet for welfare recipients. Data showing high percentages of certain immigrant groups on welfare in the capital has added to these concerns. Socially, the issue of integration is at the forefront. While a majority of immigrants feel a sense of belonging to Austria, there is a growing critical view among the native-born population about the success of integration. This sentiment is often amplified by specific incidents. For example, a foiled terror plot in 2024 involving the teenage sons of immigrants has been used to bolster arguments for stricter security and immigration control. The FPO umlaut and other right-wing voices have been highly effective at framing immigration not just as an economic burden, but as a threat to Austrian culture and security. Herbert Kickl has spoken of a consciously controlled ethnic and cultural transformation and has labelled integration a lie. The new government's policies, therefore, can be seen as a direct response to these deep-seated fears. By adopting a tough on-immigration stance, the ERRRFPLED coalition is attempting to win back voters from the far right and demonstrate that they are listening to the concerns of the populace. Chancellor Stocker has even argued that mainstream parties must handle the far right on their own terms, rejecting the idea of a political firewall. This has led to a situation where even though the far right is not officially in power, their ideology is profoundly shaping national policy. The government is essentially trying to beat the FPÖ at its own game. So Austria's sudden war on immigration in 2025 is not so sudden after all. It is the culmination of years of rising anti-immigration sentiment, the electoral success of a far-right party that has mastered the language of fear, and a new government's calculated decision to co-opt that rhetoric to stay in power. The consequences of this shift are far-reaching. For migrants and refugees, Austria is becoming an increasingly difficult, if not impossible, place to build a new life. Families are being kept apart and the path to integration and citizenship is becoming steeper. For Austria itself, the long-term effects are uncertain. Will these policies alleviate the strain on social services and improve integration, as the government claim? Or will they stifle economic growth by cutting off a vital source of labour and create a more divided and less tolerant society? And for Europe, Austria's hardline turn is a sign of a broader trend. With far-right parties gaining ground across the continent, the Austrian model of mainstream parties adopting far-right policies could become the new normal. Austria's dramatic policy shift is a stark reminder of the powerful forces of nationalism and populism in an era of global uncertainty. The world is watching to see if Fortress Austria will be a success or a cautionary tale. One thing is certain: the decisions being made in Vienna today will reverberate across Europe and beyond for years to come.